Hi everyone, my name's Katie. Welcome back to my videos on my pregnancy and just little tips I've picked along the way that I would like to share with you. As you can see, or if you've got a really beady eye, I have no longer got a bump. So, no bump, woohoo! Because we've had our little baby boy who was finally born 13 days overdue. So almost 2 weeks overdue. Oh, he finally came and we're over the moon. So we had a little boy called Aiden who was born at 8 pounds and 13 ounces, which was bang on 4 kilograms of weight. So he was a big boy, yeah. Today, in honour of that, I thought I would tell you about my labour and my experiences of labour this time round, which were very different from my labour previously with my daughter, because that was a planned C-section. So as far as labour is concerned, I feel like I ticked off quite a few boxes in regards to experiencing different elements of labour. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was pretty horrendous. But I still came away with a really positive experience, and I'll tell you why near the end of the video. By the way, if you hear any grunts or groans, that's baby in the background. So he's a bit of a grunty groany thing, so apologies for the extra noise in the room. So as I mentioned in my previous video, you might want to click up here if you'd like to watch it, I was overdue and I was being booked in for a cook's balloon procedure. So basically all this was, and I'll show you a little picture of it now, all this was is a little tube with like a little bit at the end where they fill up with fluid, and this basically puts pressure on your cervix to inflate and therefore hopefully trigger labour without any sort of chemical induction. So I was booked in for that when he was 12 days overdue. I might have mentioned in my previous video that when I made it, actually I didn't think I was going to have it the day, but I got a phone call that night to say, can you come in at around 6 p.m. By the time they sorted where I was going to go with the wards, etc, etc, I finally saw a midwife to insert the cook's balloon around 11 p.m. In a separate room from the ward, I had 2 midwives attempt to put the cook's balloon in, and both failed. This was pretty unpleasant. It was a bit like having sweep done, so that's what it felt like when they were trying to put it in. You just felt a lot of pressure on your cervix. In the end, they had to phone a doctor down from the delivery suite, and she came up and inserted the cook's balloon, and she finally got it in. And they wheeled me back to the ward, and basically the idea is that the cook's balloon stays there for 12 hours, and hopefully within that 12 hours the cervix will ripen and thin out enough for normal labour to start. What I didn't realise is that when they were trying to put in the cook's balloon, they wired me up to a monitor to check that baby was okay, and actually what they found was my body was already starting to develop contractions, so I was already going into natural labour myself. They still said go ahead with the cook's balloon because this will help speed things up. So I was moved back into the ward and encouraged to go to sleep, obviously, because by this point it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and so it was basically I was on the bed and I had this tube from the cook's balloon coming out of me. They said leave it there, you shouldn't feel any discomfort really from it, and I didn't. It was perfectly comfortable once it was in, and I tried to go to sleep, and I think I got a couple of hours sleep, and then I turned over in the bed, and all of a sudden I felt this massive amount of wetness, you know, around my crotch area, and I thought, oh, my waters are broken, was my automatic response, and I pressed the button to ask the midwife to come and check on everything, and she had a look, and it turns out it was blood. The cervix had I don't know what had really happened. No one really explained it. but basically the cook's balloon had aggravated my cervix enough that a load of blood just came out. So they turned around and said, right, okay, let's go down to the delivery suite straight away and we'll break your waters. And that would trigger everything to start. And I thought, right, okay, fine. So whilst my husband was on his way in, they just said, do you mind if I pop your waters? And I said, yep, go for it. And again, it felt like a little bit like a sweep. So it wasn't uncomfortable at all. I heard bad things about having your waters broken. It wasn't that bad. Once you've had the cook's balloon inserted almost 3 times and 4 sweeps, I was kind of ready for anything at this point. Again, the way they pop waters, I don't know if anyone has experienced this in the past, but they get a little hook which looks like a crochet hook and they stick it up there and they break the water sac and then all this water floods out. So what they found when they broke my waters was 2 things. One, I had excess water, which means I had over the usual amount of amniotic fluid in there, which as far as I'm aware, didn't make a big issue, but I think they mentioned something like it could increase the chances of baby swallowing amniotic fluid during delivery, so they had to basically take extra precautions. And then they also noticed there was meconium or baby poo in the waters, which means at some point baby was distressed. So at this point I was lying on the bed and I had blood, all my blood still pouring out. I had water, which was excess water, there was loads of it gushing out, and baby poo. So I was sat in basically a big bowl of all this going on, which wasn't nice. At this point my natural contractions were starting to get a little bit more regular, but not regular enough and not quick enough considering the baby was in distress. So they decided to put me onto the Syntocyn drip in the end, which was the synthetic oxytocin drip. And this basically ramps everything up and it basically puts you into like extreme labour for like 0 to 100 in no time at all. And oh my god, it really did go from 0 to 100 in no time. So at first I used the TENS machine, the back pads, which give little like shocks in your back, and that worked pretty well. You just have a boost button and it just sends a boost, and that sort of kept things at bay pain-wise for about an hour. With the Syntocyn drip, what they do is they start off with very small amounts and then they increase the amount they're giving you through a drip that they put in my hand. The aim is to try and give the maximum so your body can really ramp up the labour and start the labour quite quickly. So I knew that the TENS machine was only going to do so much up to a certain point. After a while, the pain of the contractions got quite painful, so they asked me if I wanted to use the gas and air. So I said yes please, and they wired up the gas and air, and my husband held the nozzle of the gas and air, which basically looks like a little hole that you put your mouth in and you breathe in and out as much as you can throughout the contraction, and what it does is I suppose it makes you feel slightly lightheaded, slightly dizzy. It just takes away from the actual pain of the contraction. Unfortunately for me, what it did is made me feel sick. But I was still using it because at this point it was the only thing that they were giving me extra to use for pain management. That I was having a contraction, my husband was giving me the gas and air, I was sucking on that. The moment the contraction stopped, I took it out, vomited into a bowl and then passed out. And this basically went on for 4 hours. The reason why they don't want to give you anything extra in 4 hours is because it gives your body enough time to establish what's going on, and they do not want to add any more chemicals or anything in your body before that, just in case labour is progressing naturally by itself. So after 4 hours they tested how dilated I was, and I was only 3 centimetres dilated. So they turned around and said, what do you want to do? And I was like, give me an epidural, just give it to me now, in between vomiting and passing out and sucking on air. So I have since discovered that the reason why I needed to leave an hour before you were asking for an epidural and giving an epidural, and again I apologise if this is just hearsay, but I was told by someone that they they give you this hour gap, because if you change your mind and that you only ask for an epidural in the heat of the moment of the pain, and you actually change your mind, or something goes wrong, like an epidural, you get damaged by an epidural in some way, then you can actually get sued. So what happens is that they leave it an hour, and if you decide after an hour that you still want the epidural, then they'll give it to you. But no one explained to me at the time it was the longest flipping hour ever. I had the epidural, and it honestly is one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. I mean, it's up there with deciding to get married and having kids. Again, for anyone who's curious about an epidural, basically it's like a little tube that they put in the back of your spine. It's a very, very tiny tube, and they put in its own drip in there, and they can top it. It's like a flexible tube, so you don't really feel it, and basically it makes the whole of your, like from your hip down, go lovely and numb. You can top it up with anaesthetic, or you can let it go. Your body can get rid of it really quickly. So if you decide, actually I don't like the epidural because I want to be able to feel it more, I feel out of control, then your body gets rid of it really quickly. But on the flip side of it, you can top it up. So you actually have a button that is red when you've just given yourself a little top up, and your body needs to get used to that. But the moment that the time elapses where you can have another little top up, you can just press a green button. You're completely in control, which is great. You just press the button and it tops it up, and it was amazing. I felt like a sheet, a fog had lifted, and I was able to see again. I looked around the room, I met new people that I didn't even know were in the room because I was passed out or vomiting or whatever, you know, half an hour before. It was incredible. It got to the point actually that I sat there with no pain, I wasn't feeling sick, I felt amazing, and I just read my book. And the anaesthetist came in about an hour later after administering the epidural, and he just looked at me and went, "You're reading a book now?" And I was like, "Yep, that's how good it was." So again, like before, they leave it another 4 hours before checking how much you're dilated, before making another plan of action, and it turns out I was only 4 centimeters dilated. And bearing in mind I had contractions, at this point it was about 3 p.m. The next day, and I had been contracting since, what, 11 p.m. the day before. And what we noticed as well is that every time I was contracting, the baby's heart rate was going down, and we didn't know why. So at this point, I think the odds were stacked against us, between me bleeding, the meconium in the waters, between the heart rate dropping, all of this was going on at the same time, and I wasn't dilating either. I wasn't dilating at any speed, even though my contractions were really strong, they were really good, they were really regular, and nothing was progressing. So the doctor came in and sat down and said, "Look, I think we need to consider an emergency C-section now, because it's obvious that this isn't progressing, and we don't want the baby to get into any more distress." And within, I think, about 20 minutes, I was on the operating theatre bed, having a little baby pulled out. It was such a, actually, despite everything that had gone on, it was a wonderful atmosphere. The theatre team were absolutely incredible. They were so jolly and upbeat, and they just made us feel completely at ease. Is that usually they have a sheet, as I mentioned through my C-section video, is that they had a sheet in front of me so I couldn't see what was going on that end, the doctor actually said to me, "Right, you've had a C-section before, are you curious to see it this time? I really want to show you what I can see right now, because it's, you know, to prove my point." And I was like, okay. So what they did is they lowered the screen down a fraction so I could just see over it. I didn't see too much because it was, you know, I wasn't sure if I wanted to see all that, but I could just see it. And as she pulled the baby out, I noticed that the cord, the umbilical cord, was wrapped around his neck 3 times, around his neck here, and she said, this is why it wasn't progressing, and this is why every time you have a contraction, the cord was pulling around his neck, which is why his heart rate it was dropping, and she said even if you had tried to go through a vaginal birth, we couldn't have guaranteed it, and in fact, if anything, he could have got more distressed. And he came into the world and with a big scream, and I burst into tears because one, I was just relieved by this point, and two, I really wasn't expecting a boy, and we have a boy. So as I mentioned again in my previous C-section video, they did exactly the same thing. They weighed him, they stitched me up, they brought me back into a side sort of room to recover and monitor for an hour after the operation. So they had to top me up with a spinal block because the epidural wasn't strong enough at this point, so they had to top me up with a spinal block. And with the anaesthetic, what it can do is make you shake. I don't know why, but it does. And I was shaking so violently for about an hour after he was born, to the point where I couldn't even hold him. So I couldn't control it. Even if I tried to relax, I just couldn't. It was almost like, you know, when you're really super cold and you go into a trembling. And then eventually we were wheeled up to the wards for me to recover and for the local anaesthetic to wear off. As I mentioned in my previous videos about wards and hospital stays, I actually asked for a private room and I got it, yay! So I had my own private room, which was incredible. It made such a difference to my mentality and my ability to heal, I think. So I had to have a catheter put in again as a result of the C-section, and once they take the catheter out, they give you 6 hours to wee naturally. And actually that was one of the hardest things, I think, with the recovery this time that I noticed, that I didn't notice last time, was the first wee. So the local anaesthetic wore off after about 8 hours completely, so I was able to walk around at this point. I would say 8-9 hours, and I went for a wee about 3 hours after my catheter came out, and then I was home within 24 hours of having C-section. Knowing it was a positive experience is because the staff of the hospital and just how everything worked, despite it being, you know, a pandemic, was just incredible. It was just incredible, and I honestly could not commend both the theatre staff and the ward staff and the midwives. I could not commend them anymore. They were amazing. These people are amazing. That's basically it. I mean, I've mentioned about hospital stays and things like that before, so I won't go into too much detail there, but that was my labour experience. If you have any questions, please post them. I'm more than happy to go over them in my next videos. So as you can imagine now, my videos going forward aren't going to be about my pregnancy. They're going to be about me bringing up my son, and some of the challenges I'm finding and some of the ones I had with my daughter. Next time I'm going to give you a bit of a lowdown on things like colic and reflux and things that you might find happen very early in the early stages of having a baby that you just panic about when you're a first-time mum. I know I certainly did the first time. This time I'm a lot more chilled out because I know what to look for, and I thought I would share that with you. So I will see you next time. Bye!